Good morning, teachers and students. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're going to get started here in just a few more minutes, so please hang tight.
Hello, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Deb Haaland, and I'm honored to share a few words during this year's Discovery Festival. The 6th Annual Discovery Festival, hosted by Big Brothers Big Sisters, has become a wonderful tradition, providing a wide array of opportunities for New Mexico students to discover the future of STEM. New Mexico is home to many historic and consequential scientific breakthroughs, discoveries that range from revolutionizing the way we'll power the cities of the future to expanding our ability to explore the cosmos. This year, for the first time, Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central New Mexico is hosting Discovery Fest virtually. I'm amazed at how many events and presentations this team has put together under such challenges this year, and I'm delighted to see that a record number of New Mexico students will join the fun and the learning of Discovery Fest. New Mexico is an amazing home for technology, and our kids are in a great position to learn more and take advantage of our state's unique and important role in the national tech space. In Congress, I support expanding STEM. Opportunities like Discovery Fest and fighting for resources for your incredible teachers, because I know how important science, technology, engineering, and math will be for our future. I want to let you all know about my annual Congressional App Challenge that invites students to come up with one-of-a-kind apps and have their app displayed at the national level. Students learn to code, manage a project, and learn more about technology. In that spirit, I'm thrilled to welcome this future generation of innovators, inventors, and explorers, and all the incredible teachers developing these bright young minds to this year's event. Our beautiful state of New Mexico, America, and frankly, our whole world's future will be counting on the creativity and innovative spirit of you young people. So I want to encourage all the future physicists, researchers, biologists, and engineers watching right now to keep reaching for the stars. Learn all you can, and most of all, have fun at this year's Discovery Fest. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much to Congresswoman Deb Haaland for that those wonderful words of support. My name is Will Toppy, and I'm the Advancement Coordinator for Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central New Mexico. And I also want to welcome you to our 6th Annual Discovery Festival presented by Honeywell. Again, just a big welcome to everyone who's joining us. I just want to mention briefly what Discovery Festival normally is, and then what, of course, Discovery Festival is for 2020. So Discovery Festival normally is a one-day event held at the Albuquerque Convention Center. We get about 3,000 students from all across central New Mexico who descend on the convention center. We get about 50 plus exhibitors from various areas of STEAM. And of course, STEAM, as we all know, stands for science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. And so all these students meet up with these exhibitors for hands-on exhibits. It is an amazing event. Our students get a lot out of it and our exhibitors get a lot out of it. Now, of course, as we all know, this year, due to the novel COVID-19 pandemic, we've had to move our event completely virtually and completely online. So instead of having just a one-day event, we've had a series of events every day for the basically the entire month of November. We started on November the 2nd, if you can believe it. So thanks to everyone who's been sticking around with us since November the 2nd. And we have about 4 more days of this Discovery Festival. We wrap up on November the 24th. So there's still time if you haven't seen our exhibits. Speaking of which, you can be sure to please check out discoveryfestnm.org. That's our website. And at that website, we have a calendar of events. And so you can see all of our previous demonstrations, the recordings of those live streams. And then you can see our schedule of events up until the 24th. And then that's, of course, where you can view live streams and that kind of awesome stuff. So please visit that website and check it out. A couple of ground rules here as we get started. So first of which, if you're watching on our YouTube live stream, welcome. We're so happy that you're here. If this stream goes down for whatever reason, I don't think it will. It hasn't so far, but fingers crossed. We are living in this virtual tech space. I'm obviously broadcasting from my home. So if anything happens, if the stream goes down, just please go right back to that YouTube page. That's the BBBS CNM YouTube page. Go right back there and we'll have the stream up and running shortly if anything crazy happens. So stand by for that. And also, second up, we do have an awesome live chat function inside of our YouTube channel. I see we have about 9 different classrooms who are all watching right now. Welcome. Teachers, if you're airing this live stream inside of your Google Classroom and your kids are asking questions or anything like that, please drop those questions inside the chat and I'll be sure to ask our guests live on air. I'd love to give shout outs. So if there's a student who's watching and want to hear your name on the live stream, let us know. Let us know what school you're watching from, and we would love to give you a shout out on this live stream. So that being said, speaking of shout outs, I do, as always, want to give a couple of quick shout outs here to some of our amazing sponsors for this event. What you're seeing would truly not be possible without the support of these wonderful people. First of which, of course, is our friends over at Honeywell. Thank you so much, Honeywell. They are our Da Vinci presenting sponsor for this entire event. This would not happen without Honeywell. So thank you so much, Honeywell. And you can view all of their recordings of their live streams again on our website, discoveryfestnm.org. Thank you, Honeywell. To our Curie sponsor, Fidelity Investments. Fidelity gave 2 awesome presentations, one on why save and then also what is credit. You can view those recordings there again at our website, discoveryfestnm.org. Thank you so much, Fidelity, for your sponsorship and your partnership for this event. They're a hit every single year, and they were again this year, so true to tradition. To our ride sponsors, to Aztec Machine and Repair, based out of beautiful Bloomfield, New Mexico. Thank you so much, Aztec, for your support. And to Air Force Research Laboratories, AFRL. They were on the stream this past Tuesday, and they talked about satellites. And it was an amazing presentation. I think one of our most popular we had for this entire festival. So please be sure to check out that recording if you haven't already. To our Newton sponsors, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA, Kirtland Air Force Base, Micronet Solutions, Sandia National Laboratories, and Presbyterian Hospitals. I want to give 2 quick shout outs here. We have the Defense Threat Reduction Agency coming back onto our live stream on Monday the 23rd at 9:30 a.m. So that's not right, but they are coming on at 9:30 a.m. And then we do also have Kirtland Air Force Base coming on Monday as well. So please be sure to check those streams out. All righty. Okay, that's a lot of information. I know I always talk again for way too long during this, but again, welcome to all of our classrooms. Please use that live chat. Let us know where you're watching from. Let us know what class you're in. All that great stuff, and we will answer your questions live on air. Okay, I talked for way too long. I'm going to jump right into our guests for this morning's live stream. I'd like to welcome Lauren and Sammy from the Society of Women Engineers. Lauren and Sammy, do we have you on?
Hi guys, we're super excited to be here this morning. My name is Sammy.
And I'm Lauren.
And we're going to talk to you today about engineering.
Great. That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to turn it straight over to you guys. And again, please use that chat and I will ask Lauren and Sammy your questions live on air. Take it away, guys.
Awesome. Sorry, guys. Let's talk about what it means to be an engineer. So I'm sure you guys have heard that word before, but maybe you don't have a concrete definition in your head. But really all we mean by engineering is people that use materials from the world around them to make something new or something useful or something fun even. So I bet all of you guys have been engineers at some point in your lives. So if you've ever played with Legos or if you've made model airplanes or paper airplanes or maybe built a fort in your backyard, maybe you've even been lucky enough to take a STEM class where you built spaghetti structures or something like that. Maybe you've even made one of these little toothpick and marshmallow cubes. The cool thing about this is we're going to show you how engineers make s'mores. I'm going to turn it over to Lauren.
There we go. I hope you guys can see this, but
pretty cool, right? So we're going to talk more about how that works later. But first, we're going to play a little bit of a game, okay? So I'm going to use this airplane analogy. So we all know that one person didn't just stand out there and make an entire airplane by themselves, right? It took a ton of different people with a ton of different skill sets to get this airplane moving. So what we call those different skill sets in engineering are disciplines. So the four main disciplines that we're going to talk about today are electrical engineers, computer scientists, chemical engineers, and mechanical engineers. And these guys all have different skill sets that help them make this plane work. So I'm going to show you a job description and you're going to see if you can guess just based on the words and the clues, what kind of engineer would do this, okay? So I want you to think in your head if you think this is an electrical engineer, a computer scientist, a mechanical engineer, or a chemical engineer that would do this. So this person's job is to make sure that all of the power supply and wiring is going to the right place. So if we didn't have them, like the windshield wiper might turn off the engine, which would be a huge bummer, right? No one wants that. But something we like to say is that if an engineer has done their job correctly, you shouldn't even think about them. Whatever item you're using should just work perfectly, right? If something works, you don't even need to think about who made it. And that's how we know that an engineer has done their job right. So think, who do you think does the power supply and the wiring for an airplane? Electrical, computer science, mechanical, or chemical engineers? So if you guessed electrical engineer, you're correct. They take care of all the power supply, which kind of makes sense, right? Because electrical is in their name. So next, we're going to talk about this person takes a bunch of raw data from all these sensors on the plane and maybe some information from the internet too. So they take things like the temperature, the pressure, the wind speeds, the distance from us to our destination, and they run it through something called an algorithm. And it spits out all of this useful information that the pilot can use. So for example, it might say that it's going to take us exactly 47 minutes to get from Albuquerque to Denver. And we're going to be going 437 miles an hour the whole time. And we're going to pass over this many mountain ranges and there's going to be this much turbulence, these kinds of things. But that's something where if I just looked at a sheet of numbers, I could never come up with that. We need this kind of engineer to do that for us. So if they did their job wrong, we might end up in Canada when we meant to go to Denver, or we might run out of fuel halfway through our flight. So think in your head, what kind of engineer would do this? Do you think this is an electrical engineer, a computer scientist, a mechanical engineer, or a chemical engineer? So if you guessed a computer scientist, you're correct, which kind of makes sense, right? They take all of this data and they run it through an algorithm on a computer to spit out useful information that the pilot can use. So next, we're going to talk about the actual structure of the plane. So picture like a 100-foot long Boeing 747. They might even be longer than that. I'm not actually sure. But imagine that it had wings as long as my arms, right? Like little T-Rex wings. We know just by looking at that it's not going to fly. But how long should the wings be? Should they be 100 feet long? Should they be 50 feet long? Should they be 75? We don't know. We need this kind of engineer to do a bunch of math and physics to calculate the best proportion of wing length to plane length, as well as a bunch of other stuff. How big should our tires be? What should our landing gear look like? What should the shape of the plane be? All of these things are really important. So what kind of engineer do you think's job it is to design and build the actual structure of the plane? And again, all of the possible answers are up there in gray. Test yourself. So if you guessed mechanical engineer, you're correct. Their job is to design and build structures. So the last thing we're going to talk about with this, whose job do you think it is to make the fuel and other essential chemicals like antifreeze that are required to get the plane off the ground? If we didn't have them, the plane would never leave the airport, right? It's like a car with no gas or a toy with no batteries. We can't move the plane unless we have this fuel. It's super important. So what kind of engineer do you think does this?
Who's left?
Yeah, and the last one that's left, right? This is a chemical engineer. And Lauren and I are partial. We're both chemical engineers. So this is our favorite kind of engineering. And so there is a difference between what a chemical engineer does and just plain chemistry. So for instance, chemistry would just be baking a dozen cookies, which takes a lot of chemistry. There's a ton of chemistry in baking. But if we wanted to be like the Oreo or Chips Ahoy factory that make 40 billion cookies a year, there has to be some serious thought that goes into that process. We can't just like whip that up in our oven. So that's the difference between chemistry and chemical engineering. We do a lot of scaling up and thinking about how we design, operate, and maintain large chemical plants. So to give you another example, we're gonna make some pumpkin toothpaste, okay? So what that looks like, here's our pumpkin, and we're gonna brush his teeth. And I want you guys to think about, this is just one pumpkin, but think about if we had to do this for every pumpkin in the United States. Or like Colgate has to make toothpaste for every person in the United States, right? It takes a ton of materials and a ton of thought. So all I'm gonna do is take this hydrogen peroxide, pour it into my pumpkin, then we're gonna take a little bit of yeast and we're gonna brush this guy's teeth. Let me get his lid. Oh, well, so we made so much toothpaste that it's actually coming out of his eyeballs, right? So this is not, or this is something that a chemical engineer would have to think about. How much of these chemicals do we need so that this doesn't happen, right? This is crazy. And I know you guys can't feel it, but this pumpkin is super warm, which is another thing that we'd have to think about as chemical engineers. What temperature do we want our room to be so that this reaction happens as best as possible?
And we did get some questions in
Sure.
about that. Yeah. So first up, while that pumpkin is oozing all that awesome stuff, we got a comment about, it's kind of funny, as you were describing the planes, we could hear a plane in the background as well. So it's very on theme. So that was pretty awesome. So one of the students wants to know if being a chemical engineer is dangerous.
Yeah, so we're going to talk a lot about that at the end. So something that we really have to consider is safety. Like imagine if we did this in a giant building and it just filled with toothpaste. I mean, that would probably not happen, but there are a lot of things like that that we have to consider. Chemical engineering, a lot of processes are really hot, so there's a lot of danger of explosions and fires. And there's a lot of chemicals, right? And those can be toxic, those can be corrosive, those can be bad for your skin, all of these things. So,
But that's why chemical engineering is so important. It's because we want to learn how to mitigate the risks, which means we want to reduce the risk. We want to make sure nothing bad happens. And that's the biggest thing a chemical engineer is doing.
so oozy.
Yeah. And so someone wants to know, can you actually use that to brush your teeth?
Please don't. No. Not a good idea, just for pumpkins.
And this is a good one. So, how is there chemistry in baking?
Oh, I
we
would
can
love
answer
to
that.
answer that. Yeah. So we're going to talk about acids and bases in a second, but that's a huge part of baking. So I'm sure you guys have used baking soda or baking powder, and those are both bases. Thank you, Lauren. So when they mix with something in your batter that's an acid, so like brown sugar is actually really acidic. When those two things mix, they bubble and they give off gas, and that makes cakes and cookies really light and fluffy. So maybe you've mixed vinegar and baking soda like in a volcano or something, and you've watched it kind of bubble and explode. That same thing is happening in your baked goods and eggs even. Maybe you've tried to mix oil and water together and you watch that they just kind of separate. They don't really mix. But if you use an egg, it's what's called an emulsifier. So it allows water and oil to mix together. So if you are bored at home and need a science experiment, and you take a mason jar and you fill it half with oil, half with water, and you crack an egg in it and shake it up. You should probably scramble the egg first, but still, shake it all up together. The oil and water will mix. They'll be fine. But if you don't add the egg, they'll separate. So that's another really important thing in baking. You have to get all of your ingredients to mix nicely together.
Interesting.
That was a really long-winded answer, but hopefully that answered your question.
No. That's great. You know, I think about other disciplines too that we take for granted. You know, like we've been talking a lot about beer brewing during these presentations as well. Like that's obviously a chemical piece, and then I mean even coffee roasting, right?
Yeah.
Coffee roasting is really into chemical engineering as well.
It is.
And okay, and this is the last question we got in. So, can you make pumpkin spice toothpaste?
Silly.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna turn it back over to you guys then.
No, great. Thanks for the questions, guys. That's awesome. All right, so we just kind of talked about it with our baking question, but we're going to talk just a little bit more about acids and bases. So let me wipe the remaining toothpaste off of our tabletop real quick.
Look at that in the background.
Look at that pumpkin. His teeth are going to be so squeaky clean, and I guess his eyeballs too. Thank you, Lauren. All right, so let's talk about acids and bases real quick since we just talked about it. But acids, we see them a lot in our daily life and especially in our diet. So things like citrus fruit, like lemons and oranges, those are acids. Things that taste sour are generally acids. So like vinegar is super common. Same with buttermilk. And like I said, brown sugar is actually acidic, even though it's something that we don't really think about. And then kind of on the opposite end, these aren't as common in our diet, but they're just as important. So bases are the opposite of an acid. So bases tend to taste kind of chalky or bitter. So maybe you've taken Tums for an upset stomach, that's a base. And so also baking powder, like I said, and that tastes kind of bitter. I wouldn't recommend eating that. But those are all things that are characteristics of a base. So we have this really cool thing called indicator paper, which can tell you if you're dealing with an acid or a base. So what I'm going to do with this indicator paper is take this little dish pack. And so a lot of household cleaners and detergents are actually bases. Hopefully you guys can see that. Yeah. So I'm just going to use some of this dish powder from, just a dish pack from my dishwasher. And add a little bit of water. Smidge more. And I'm just gonna wipe this indicator paper with my dishwasher water solution here. And we're gonna see. And I wrote this silly message that dishwashing soap is a base. So we can see that, right? The indicator paper changed a little orangey red. This wasn't as good of a piece. Sometimes it's blood red, dark red, but still the concept is the same. And if we wipe this same paper with some vinegar, which is an acid, we should see that the color goes back to yellow, right? All of that red spot kind of gets dabbed out. So see, back to the way it was before. I mean, a little bit wet, but certainly not red anymore. So that is a cool aspect of acids and bases. And that was a good question in the chat. Safety is super important. So I'm going to turn it over to Lauren to talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so like Sammy said, safety is super important. As a chemical engineer, we want to make sure all of our processes are safe. We want to make sure everyone working at, whatever, industry we're in, we want to make sure they're all safe. So one of the things, so we need to know about a lot of the issues that can arise, and we need to figure out how we're going to keep them from happening. So one of the things that we're going to show you today, it's kind of just a fun demo, is that sometimes if you get a lot of like flour or sugar together in like a big container, we can have what is called a dust explosion happen. So what we're going to show you is kind of going to mimic a dust explosion. So because I'm going to be playing with a little bit of fire today, we have a safety goggles, we have a fire extinguisher. But anyways, let me tell you a little bit more about this. So this pumpkin is going to be an enclosed space. So it's an enclosed space. It has oxygen, obviously, just from the air inside the pumpkin. And then what we're also going to do is that we put some of this lycopodium powder inside the pumpkin. So that's going to act as a fuel source. And so the last thing that we're going to add is we're going to add a little ignition, well, a little bit of a flame. I have a candle in there, so.
Yeah, and you guys are going to see a super small scale example of a dust explosion. But when these happen in big buildings, it can be devastating. This is super dangerous. So this is definitely something we have to think about as chemical engineers. So we're going to do the fire breathing pumpkin demo, but he's been giving us a little bit of trouble this morning, so you might have to bear with us.
Candle doesn't want to light.
Excellent.
Oh, there we go. So as I said earlier, we need a enclosed space, we need oxygen, we need a fuel source, and then we need a flame. So our fuel source is going to be the powder versus the flame. So anyways, the last thing that we need is dispersion, which is like movement of the particles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just give it some air, and then we should see a little bit of an explosion. And this, remember, it's a very small scale. I probably put just about less than a little spoonful of powder in there. But here we go. Oops. I think I just blew out my candle. That's exactly what I did. Can you bring me some more?
Yes, I can. Yeah. Pumpkin has been giving us some trouble. All right.
So there we go.
There you go.
That's what we wanted to happen. So like I said, that little bit of air that I got, that's all it needed for it to be kind of an explosion. And like we said, we just use a little bit of a spoonful of powder. But imagine if we had
An entire sugar factory or flour factory.
yeah, because even just like a cup alone, like a whole cup of it, that would have been a lot bigger. So then when you add it and you say like a whole factory, car size bigger than that, it can be really devastating. So that's one of the things as chemical engineers that we need to be able to understand.
Awesome. We did get some questions on that. I think that was a hit for sure. So we have 3 questions. So first, why does dust explode? The second question is flour dangerous? And then the third question is, will dirt explode?
So what you need for a dust explosion is these really tiny particles, right? So it's almost like when you rub your hands together and they get warm, it's kind of like that, kind of with electricity too. But this is generally the concept.
Yeah.
But think about this with a bunch of teeny tiny particles. And the smaller the particles are, the more there are, right? So the more heat and the more energy you have. So no, flour is not inherently dangerous. The little thing of flour you have in your house is probably not going to blow up. There needs to be kind of a confined space. And like Lauren was talking about, there are kind of, 5 things that need to be present for you to have a dust explosion. So don't worry about this in your house.
Yeah, so we have, like I said, the confined space or pumpkin, oxygen, which is just the air, and then we also need the fuel, which is, could be your sugar, and then ignition. The ignition for us was just the lit candle, and then the last thing that we needed was the dispersion, which was the air. So at home it's not dangerous, but sometimes, like we said, when we get really big operations, that's when it can become dangerous. And think about it. If there's an explosion somewhere, it might cause just other problems, and that's kind of the issue with it.
Yeah. Do you guys want to see it again? We can try if we can get it to work. Yeah, since it's been giving us some issues this morning.
Yeah, a little closer.
Just make sure we don't burn Lauren's laptop.
I mean, in the name of science.
In the name of science. I'm gonna let Lauren handle the flame part since she has safety glasses.
But as a side note, what lycopodium powder is, just because it's really interesting, I think, it is actually spores from club moss. So it's kind of, and I just think that's like, it's something that we can find like in nature.
Yeah, it's just from a plant.
Did I like those? I did. Yeah, okay, we're good.
Oh no. Here. Okay. Great.
He's like, gotta get out of the way before she does that. Oh, I keep blowing out my candles. It's just at the wrong angle right now. Can you grab some more? Yeah.
So while we're doing this, does anybody have any more questions?
I'll keep an eye on the chat. Nothing just yet.
Cool.
But keep those questions coming, teachers. If your kids have questions, please drop them inside that chat.
There we go. All right. So maybe we should have pushed our luck with the third time. But there's our fire-breathing pumpkin. Pretty cool, right? So hopefully you guys learned something today about engineering or chemistry or chemical engineering. And yeah, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
So one question that just came in is, does it smell bad when it burns?
It does. Yeah, my garage is pretty stinky right now.
That's awesome. And this is a good one. So the student's wondering if they want to look into engineering, what should they start to look at or study now in school?
Yeah.
I can answer that. So I think,
Please.
so we're both students at the University of New Mexico right now, and we're part of the Society of Women Engineers. And I think that what I didn't know when I was younger was just how important, and I know math is hard, but I didn't realize that like just how important and how helpful it was that I had gotten a good base in like throughout my education. So I will say, if you want to go to college and do engineering, you can definitely do it. But it will make it a lot easier when you're there if you have a decent math base, and it's so important, and it helps everything. So
Yeah, math and physics. Take as many of those classes as you can. And that's awesome that you want to try engineering. We love that.
Yeah.
to chemical engineering,
Obviously.
but they're all really great, and look into them.
And what kind of fun stuff do you get to do as an engineer? Like, what does a day in the life of an engineer look like? I think is what this question is asking.
Yeah. So one thing that's really cool is that I think engineering is almost everything you can think of. So we were talking the other day about all the jobs that there are available in just chemical engineering. And there's stuff from like, in the like kind of more biology. So you can work with like renewable like resources. So or you can work with like water purification to all the way to like the pharmaceutical industry to the like,
Yeah.
oil and gas
Think
industry.
about what's on the forefront of everyone's mind right now is the COVID-19 vaccine, right? That's chemical engineers that were at the forefront of that. We had to scale, or we, like I did anything, but chemical engineers had to take,
Or they're gonna have to take.
or they're going to have to take, a single dose or like whatever they did, 40,000 doses of a vaccine and scale that up to 8 billion. There are 8 billion people in the world. That's a huge undertaking. To be able to produce that many vaccines in a year, that's a ton of chemical engineering.
But so yeah, I guess like the daily jobs is that a lot of times it's like designing, monitoring, and operating different types of industries. I say industries because usually it could be chemical plants, but like sometimes it's not particularly chemical plant. Like
Yeah,
yeah,
really, you can do a lot of things with engineering. You can make it whatever you want it to be, but hopefully that's what you're asking and not the day in the life of a college student. I guess I can answer that too. It's a little bit less exciting. I'll spoil that for you now.
Well, it's pretty exciting. You're lighting pumpkins on fire. That seems pretty cool. And that's a good question. So what kind of math do you use? You're talking about laying a good foundation of math. So what kind of math do you use?
Ooh, so I don't know that I didn't have no, maybe I did. Very little experience with this in high school and middle school, but your calculus classes with derivatives, which is just a lot of rates, that's huge in engineering. So how fast do these reactions occur? How do they depend on different things like temperature and pressure? Those are all differential equations. So you get a little taste of that in calculus, and you get a big taste of that in differential equations and partial differential equations.
but to be honest, essentially algebra is the fundamentals of everything. It all goes back to algebra. Like if you can in school get a solid base of algebra, that will take you really far.
That is a great point. 90% of the time when I mess up on my homework, it's a silly algebra mistake rather than, like a calculus mistake.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. Pay close attention in your algebra classes.
But yeah, no, we also use a bunch of computer programs now to do some of our math for us, which is really helpful. You still have to learn how to do it, but you are able to use like programs. One of them is called MATLAB, and that helps us to
Makes our lives a lot easier.
yeah. So
Awesome. Okay, great. And it looks like we got one more question coming in. And this is a good one. We've had a lot of college recruiters kind of throughout the week to talk about various engineering programs at different colleges. So why did you choose UNM?
that's a good question.
That is a good question.
It's a really tough
No,
one.
no.
Almost no matter what your engineer or whatever your background is, right?
Yeah, I think I chose UNM because, we're at home. It's a good price. Like, it's very comfortable. I like being here with like my parents. I like having that opportunity I have my own like house, but I get to drive home and see them, especially right now during like the coronavirus. Like, it's nice to have this, like to have your parents and stuff like that, just to go home and be like, can you feed me? But,
UNM is cheap also.
yeah, it really is.
Especially with the lottery.
But I will say, I
So
also
cheap.
believe that I can mostly only talk about the chemical engineering program at UNM, but I have absolutely loved the program. I think we have a really kind of like small, kind of close knit group of students there that like all work together really well. It's super friendly, super supportive.
We have a Discord.
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome.
All of our classes named in it. So yeah, it's really nice. Like I think it's a great environment, and
Yeah, I think engineering as a whole is very supportive. I am sure that's not unique to UNM because it's just difficult and you need friends to get through it.
yeah.
That's great.
We have a
Well,
new building, so
what's that?
and we have a brand new building, so there's
Very
that.
fancy. Yeah.
That helps. That certainly helps. Well, I did want to give a shout out. We have, speaking of UNM engineering, so today is like the engineering day. It seems like we have at 11:30 this morning, we have the New Mexico Tech, and then we talk about recruitment. And then also here at 1 p.m., we have the UNM School of Engineering who's coming onto the live stream. So if any of this interests you, students or teachers, if you have any students whose interest is really piqued by this presentation, it'd be great to bring them back to the 1 p.m. They can talk with some recruiters from the UNM School of Engineering and kind of break into that a little bit more about the school itself. So awesome. That looks like all the questions we got in. Thank you so much to the both of you for coming on the presentation today and sharing with our kids what this is all about. It's great.
Yeah. Thank you.
One
guys.
last thing though.
Yeah.
Since we're the Society of Women Engineers, and so I just want to say that I really hope that. So we wanted to do this because we think that when we were in high school, we didn't really know anything about engineering and what it really was, or younger, and so we really think that it's really good for students to learn, and we encourage you to go check it out and learn a little bit more about it, because I didn't even consider it until it was way past my first year of college, and that was a bummer. So yeah, that's it. That's all.
That's great. Well, no, really, that's really and truly, that's a great point. And, I think this inspired a spark inside of a lot of our students. So thank you both very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you learned something.
Great. Thanks, Lauren and Sammy. You guys have a good one. And I do want to give another shout out here as we wrap up again. Don't forget, we have more presentations the rest of today. Again, at 11:30, we have New Mexico Tech, going to be talking about recruitment. 1 p.m., we have UNM School of Engineering. And then we have 2 days next week. So that's the Monday and Tuesday of next week, jam-packed with awesome presentations that you are not going to want to miss. So please plan on attending. Take a look at our schedule, discoveryfestnm.org, and you can see our full schedule of events there. And finally, and lastly, I do want to give a shout out to our final, well, not to our final, but to our amazing sponsors for this event. Honeywell, thank you so much for your partnership and your sponsorship there. Of course, our presenting sponsor for this entire event. What you're seeing would not be possible without the wonderful folks over at Honeywell. So thank you, Honeywell. That big thank you as well is due to Fidelity Investments. They are our Curie sponsor for our virtual Discovery Festival. Thank you so much, Fidelity, for your Curie sponsorship. To Aztec Machine and Repair, Air Force Research Laboratories, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, Kirtland Air Force Base, Micronet Solutions, Sandia National Laboratories, and all of our heroes at Presbyterian Hospital. Thank you all so much. Well, thanks again for watching, students and teachers. We're going to see you again here in just under an hour at 11:30. So please stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll see you then.